الله أكبر الله أكبر.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Islamic Center at New York University podcast, coming to you straight from the heart of New York City. We're building an amazing Muslim community here at ICNYU where everyone is welcomed and respected no matter where you're from or where you're at. This is the place to be. So open your ears and your heart and come along with us on another life-changing journey. Bismillah.
Bismillahi walhamdulillah wa salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum everyone. Welcome to this weekly halaqah. Today's topic is on understanding the path to change and growth, the nature of the path. And the reason I wanted to talk about this is because our misunderstanding of the nature of the path, when we want to grow, when we want to heal, when we want to improve ourselves, when we want to transform spiritually, mentally, emotionally, if we don't, that misunderstanding of the path can create more obstacles than necessary on the path itself. And a lot of times when we don't understand the nature of the path, any little change on the path throws us off. And so it's really important to understand that, some of the things that to naturally expect on the path to change, on the path to growth. So let's say you decided, okay, you know what, I'm going to, New Year's around the corner. You decide, okay, you know what, I'm going to make 2023 best year ever, hashtag, New Year resolutions, right? I don't really believe in resolutions. I believe in habits, right? Creating intentional daily habits that we want to create more of in our lives or implement more of in our lives. But whatever it is you're trying to achieve, whatever it is you're trying to accomplish, whatever kind of improvements you're trying to make in your life, it's important to understand the nature of the journey. And so the first misconception that a lot of times people have, even though I think they don't have this misconception rationally, I think it's the way we react that shows we have a misconception. So what I mean is that if you're about to start a journey of change and someone asked you, hey, is this journey going to be perfect? You're probably going to say what? No. It's not going to be perfect. But then what happens when people start the journey and everything goes well, and then all of a sudden everything goes imperfect? And it's like, what's happening? What's going on, right? So our reactions show the truth of how we view things. And many times people will say, oh my God, I was doing so well. I now look, I failed. It's not a success. But why do we expect perfection on the path? And we're not meant to be perfect. And so failure, setbacks, imperfection, windy roads. I always compare the journey of change and transformation to like hiking, right? Because when you start out a path, the most boring hikes are just like straight, right? If you just got on the hike, you went hiking and it's like a straight, flat, terrain, and you see the finish line, is that really a hike if you see the end? If you're like standing at the beginning and you're like, oh, there's the parking lot, or there's the other side of it. That's not really a fulfilling hike, right? But then when you start off and you can't see the road, you can't see, it's because why? It's because it's there's windy terrain, there's windy roads, right? There's, hills. You go up, you go down. The terrain itself, the road itself, it changes in texture. It changes in its like in what it has. Sometimes it's rocky. Sometimes it is flat and it's easy. Sometimes you're going downhill and you're like, wow, this is nice. I can see a view. And then sometimes you're going uphill and you cannot see the end in sight and you're struggling and out of breath and so I learned a lot from hikes and being out in nature about how we should approach our own path to change. Is that one, we should never expect perfection. And we should never expect the progress stays the same. And we should never expect the nature of the path to stay the same either. And we should never expect to see the end in sight. And this is what happens, one of the most common things that people say when they start doing inner work and they start whether it's growing closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or they start wanting to let go of certain habits, or they start improving themselves in any way, mindset, or saying, you know what, I'm gonna make sure I put these boundaries, I'm gonna make sure I heal, I'm gonna make sure, whatever it is. One of the most common things, or especially when people are in a lot of pain, let's say they went through a difficult experience, and all they feel is the pain. So they're standing at the beginning of the road. They know they gotta heal, they know that they need to give it time, but what is the most common thing that people say? How will that look like? How will that healing look like? How will my growth look like? How will I achieve these things? These things sound great, like, wow, getting closer to Allah, feeling peace inside, feeling sakina, not caring about what people think, feeling present, feeling mindful, having taqwa, having tawakkul, have all of these things, right? We all want it. Feel grounded, to feel like self-trust, authenticity. But then it's like, but how? While they're standing at the beginning of the path. This is the nature of the human being. Verily, mankind was created anxious, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, right? That we always have this sense of like, we don't like uncertainty, because that's what anxiousness is. Anxiousness is associated with our discomfort with not knowing. If you knew everything, would you get anxious? No. So anxiousness is associated with the future, the next moment. I don't know that. What's going to happen? How will it look like? How will the outcome look like? So whatever it is you're trying to achieve, when you're standing at the beginning of the path, you're not going to see the entire path. And you're going to get anxious. Can you accept that? Can you accept that you're going to be a little anxious? Not all anxiety and stress is bad. It's natural to feel anxious at the beginning of an uncertain path. It's natural to feel stress. In fact, in psychology, we say there's good anxiety, good stress that leads you and propels you forward to doing things that are uncomfortable, to face new opportunities, right? And it leading you to change. So when you're standing at the beginning of the path, you tell yourself, it's okay if I don't know. It's okay if I don't see the entire path. And I've experienced this in my own life, especially when learning certain like tazkiyah principles. Sometimes I remember one time asking my teacher, well, how will I, achieve this kind of, state, or this kind of, practice? You just don't think, you don't know how it's going to look like. And so this is just the nature of us. We want to know how, because we want to achieve what we're trying to achieve. So it comes from a place of like, I want to get there. So you tell yourself again that it's okay if I don't see the entire path. I'm not meant to see the entire path. I'm not meant to know what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows. This is why we humble our mind in sujood the end of every rak'ah. This part of the front part of our brain, the prefrontal cortex, it's the part of us that is the most advanced part of us. It's what differentiates us from animals, right? It's the part of us that's responsible for decision making and abstract thinking and like the planning. It's not a coincidence that that's what we humble in sujood in every rak'ah. You're humbling and you're remembering, I'm not supposed to burden this part of me to know what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows. I am not the Lord of myself. I do not have all knowledge. I wasn't designed to have all knowledge. So it's okay if I don't know. But what do I know? And that's what you find comfort in. It's that in the uncertainty, you hold on to what is certain. And that is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows how it's going to look like. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has never left me. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is seeing me. He's hearing me. He's with me. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He has me. He got me. You hold on to what is certain, to what is constant, to Al-Hayyul Qayyum, which is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if you think about it, people don't often notice what is uncertain until they care about something. But in reality, beyond this very moment, everything is uncertain. Correct? But then we only notice the uncertainty and we're like, wait a minute, when we're about to do something that we really care about, when we apply for something we really care about, when we're about to, like we're invested in something, then it's like, oh my God, there's so much uncertainty. But in reality is, it's always uncertain. We're so fragile as human beings. We're so in need of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? We're of course, also Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us resilience, but it's like both can sit next to each other. We're resilient, but always in need. Gave us a lot of capabilities, but we always have that humility that, no, we have a Rabb. We have a caretaker. We have one who is the all-knowing, the all-seeing, the all-hearing. I'm not the all anything. Even our sight is not all-seeing. Our hearing is not all-hearing. Our thoughts are not all-knowing, right? And so it's important to remember this. It doesn't make us weak to humble ourselves in front of Allah. In fact, it is what strengthens you because you don't burden a part of yourself more than it was designed to bear. And that's what happens. A lot of times when people struggle, it's not because of the test itself. It's because of what they're burdening themselves that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not ask them to burden themselves with. It's placing this pressure on themselves to know everything, to know what the next step is, to have a plan, to have a solution. You get exhausted. Don't have a solution. But once you actually acknowledge that truth and you say, yeah, I don't have a solution and maybe I'm not meant to right now. And that's okay. It creates relief. It creates, because you're surrendering. And so to acknowledge those moments where you don't know. And that when you don't know something, and I'm not talking about like you try a little bit and you don't know. No, you keep putting the effort, of course, right? But let's say you keep putting the effort. You're searching for an answer. You're searching for a solution to a problem. You're putting in work and you're not seeing results. It's okay. Allah sees my effort. My effort is not lost in front of Allah. And in time, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will honor this effort. And He will show me the best of outcomes. It's trusting that Allah has a timing for what He unveils for you to see. Many times people want answers for themselves, something they're trying to figure out within themselves, something they're trying to figure out about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, something they're trying to figure out about their life, a decision they need to make. They keep trying, and they're so frustrated with not knowing the answer. Not realizing that even the timing of the door opening for us to access that unveiling, the timing of it is something that Allah has to decide. So Allah does not just choose what knowledge He gives you, He chooses the timing of when to unveil you from that knowledge. And His timing is so perfect. Because had He given you access to that knowledge about yourself, about your circumstance, about your life at a certain time prior to that moment, it's possible you might not have been able to handle it. It's possible you weren't mature enough to handle it. It's possible you weren't ready for it. It's possible that if you knew that then, people always say like, oh, I wish I knew this earlier. I wish I knew this earlier. Who knows? Because maybe if Allah showed you that earlier, you wouldn't have done anything with it. You wouldn't have been ready to receive it. You ever give advice or even receive advice from someone, right? And the person listening to the advice doesn't act upon it. And you get frustrated and you're like, well, why aren't they taking my advice? Especially for parents, right? Like, why isn't my child listening? I'm telling them what to do. I'm telling them what's right. I'm telling them. Maybe they weren't ready to receive it at that time. And then there comes a time when they do actually connect with it. And they say, oh wow, my mom used to say this, or my dad used to say this. And then they were ready to receive it. That's why when we give advice, we should never think too highly of or put like, okay, you give advice, do your part, but move on. Don't give yourself like, sometimes people will say like, well, I gave that person advice and they don't implement it. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us so many things. right? And he's so patient and kind, and he waits for us to implement it. Who are we to think that we know also what is 100% best for someone, or when they should receive something? You do your part in front of Allah, but you realize that every person is on their own journey with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah is their Rabb, not you. Allah is their caretaker. He is taking care of their heart. But you do your part. And Allah will reward you for that, for passing on that goodness, for showing up for that person, for advising them. But back to my point, it's really important to just be patient with not knowing. And this is something that comes up a lot in the work that I do at, as a teacher in my institute, where I work with students on going through like several phases of, learning key psychospiritual tools and knowledge, and then implementing it. So sometimes, when people start out, they'll go and they'll learn something, and they'll implement it, and they'll come back, and they'll be like, I can't, like, I don't know how to like apply this. And so one of the things I feel like I always say comes up so often is, be patient with not knowing. Be patient with not knowing. Sometimes I'll be like, I don't know why, I feel this way. And I'm trying and I'm reflecting and there's a block. It's okay, be patient with not knowing. But keep trying. And I can almost every time they'll come back. Not that week, not that month sometimes. But in time they come back and they say, now I know now what I was trying to seek. And you know what? It's the perfect timing. And so can we be patient with uncertainty? Can we be patient with not knowing, even when we're working on ourselves? And the reason I say this is because, and I'm giving the example of my students, is because when we start working on ourselves, we feel like we take ownership of it to the degree that we feel responsible for what we know and don't know. So it's like, okay, well, I'm focusing on myself, I'm working on myself, so I need to put pressure on myself to know everything, to do everything, to be perfect. No, you put forth your effort, but you don't expect yourself to know everything. And so it's this understanding that the journey itself has a lot to offer you. So let's say you started at the beginning of the path and you said, oh, I want to achieve, let's say like you were hiking and someone told you there's like a great view at the end of this hiking trail. And you started off at the beginning of the path and you're with a friend, and the friend goes, you know what, I have a picture of the view. Here, this is what it looks like. And you're like, like, I know, but would you go home, or would you still want to see the view? Who would go home? Who would go home if someone showed them a picture of the view? Nobody, right? Who would still walk it? Everybody. So what does that mean? If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if you're standing at the beginning of the path and you don't take one step and you don't do anything, but you want to see what the end is going to look like for you. Okay, let's say Allah shows you, right? Who's the one who's robbed of the journey? The benefits of the journey? You. Right? So you miss out on walking the path and reaping what the path has to offer you. So what does the path have to offer you? The path has to offer you the opportunity to face obstacles. We don't learn as human beings in times of ease as we do in times of difficulty. If it was always easy, you don't have to really reflect a lot. Because there's no problem. We reflect when there's a problem. We need a solution, right? So the journey itself, you start walking and you start being present with what's right in front of you. And you start enjoying what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts on your path. Then you face an obstacle. Okay, how am I going to maneuver this? How am I going to navigate this? Ya Allah, help me. It's in these mundane moments that we think are ordinary on our journey that prepare us for what is extraordinary. When you're in it, in the valley, as they say, right? Like when you're just like in those dark periods in your life or in a dark tunnel and you can't see the light and you can't see the end and you're wondering, when is my opening? Where is the light? If you weren't in a dark tunnel and you didn't have access to the light, you would never have the opportunity to see Allah as your light. Allah is a nur. If Allah always lit it for you, never gets dark, would you need to turn on another light? If you're in a lit room, you never need light. Sometimes Allah makes it dark. Allah deprives you of seeing the end, so you hold on to Him and you see Him. And that's why in our tradition we say, Allah loves those whom He tests. There's a big misunderstanding when it comes to this. People think, oh my God, I don't want to get close to Allah because if I get close to Allah, I'm going to be tested more. Right? Or they associate that, like, you know, that test with, or that being close to Allah is equated to pain. But actually, without the pain, you wouldn't see Allah's love for you. Without the dark times, the difficult times, the not knowing, the journey itself, you wouldn't have any reason to see Allah's immense, immense love and mercy for you and guidance for you. That's the nature of the human being. When in ease, you forget your need for Allah, and that's really what it is. So you walk this journey and then you face some obstacles and then you start thinking, you start accessing skills that you never accessed before. So here Allah's, you know, would you have accessed those skills if things were easy? No, but that problem that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put on your path now causes you to access a different part of you that you never accessed. Okay, let me access these tools Allah gave me. Let me go consult with this person. Let me go strive. Let me practice this. Let me do this. Things that you probably never built the muscle of doing before. So you grow. You're building. He's molding you every step of the way. And then throughout the journey, He gives you ease. There's a flat road. You're like, okay, it's a little easy. You know, inna ma'al usri yusra. Verily, with hardship comes ease. Or verily, with hardship is ease. It's with it. It's hard, it's a difficult time, but then there's like little pockets of ease. You're like, oh wow, okay. I have time to breathe. I have time to collect myself. I gain something new. I have the support of a friend. I have the support of my family. You look the little but significant beauties, right? Not even little. I hesitate to say little because they're huge. These things that we deem little, that sometimes we don't notice because we're walking a journey that we have identified as difficult. And we're thinking, oh, why is the journey so hard? Where's the open door? Where's the light at the end of the tunnel? Not realizing that Allah's giving us so much light, so much strength, so much growth through it. And this comes up a lot for people when they say, like, why is Allah giving, you know, someone something so easily that I've been praying for years? This is a common question that people have. Here I am, I'm working so hard, I'm trying to be more practicing, I'm praying, I'm making tahajjud, people say this, right? And then I see Allah giving those who are doing less than me, or what they perceive as less, right? Giving them what I've been asking for years. And what I say to that is that notice what He is giving you by withholding that blessing. Because what He gives people when He withholds is far greater than what He gives when He gives you the blessing easily. So He withholds something from you. You're walking the journey. You keep asking. You're gaining closeness to Allah. You're gaining strength. You're growing. But you know what you're also getting when Allah withholds something from you? Is that you learn the most powerful tool we can learn in this world. To not define our worth by anything Allah gives or takes away. That is a strength. That is a superpower. You become more grounded with that strength. Right? Because that's the essence of Islam, right? Is that we don't put anything in the same value as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we go back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with a heart that is sound and complete through Him. And so sometimes Allah will give a person a blessing, and guess what happens? That blessing becomes their whole world, their whole identity. And they don't know who they are outside of that blessing. But when Allah withholds something you really want, and it's really tough, He's giving you an opportunity to know yourself and form your identity through Him. That is a superpower. And so you get so much through the journey itself, but you have to have that outlook. You have to have that mindset as you're walking through. You have to have that heart, what I call is the heart set. You know, we always talk about mindset. And something I teach my students is also you don't just set your mind, you have to set your heart in the right direction. So you're cultivating this mindset and this heart set of seeing Allah's meaning for you as you walk through the path. What is Allah giving me as I go through this journey? Okay, I'm going through an obstacle. What is Allah giving me? Setback. What is Allah giving me? What is Allah teaching me? How is Allah molding me? I love Surah Taha because in Surah Taha, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking to Musa alayhi salam, and He's telling him, you know, I've molded you under my eye. He also tells him that I have وَأَلْقَيْتَ عَلَيْكَ مَحَبَّةً مِنِّي, like I have placed upon you love from me. So think about this. He's telling him He loves him, and He's telling him in the same in the same section, He's telling him that he has basically what? He's been rearing him, molding him to be who he needs to be in this world, to prepare him for his path in this world. It's no different than what Allah does for us. So as you're going through the journey and it's hard and it's difficult and Allah's testing you, remember these verses where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking to Musa alayhi salam. And think of Allah saying that to you. I'm molding you under my eye. I'm basically like I'm right here watching over you, molding you to who you need to be, preparing you, allowing you to strive towards your potential. When you have this outlook and it's always about you and Allah, the journey becomes sweet. Yeah, you're in pain at times, but you know it has purpose. You know it has meaning. You know it's going to lead you somewhere far greater, because Allah never puts you through difficulty except to give you something greater. So you just have this really, really deep connection to His role in your life. You and Him. You and Him. At the end of the day, it's always about you and Him. And so Allah reveals the path when we continue walking. Even if we have setbacks, we fall, we trip. Do we ever get up on a hiking trail and say, oh my God, I fell. Gotta go back. Right? Unless like we're obviously like really hurt, right? But like when you trip or you fall, there's a setback. You don't usually, you care for the journey so much that you want to continue walking. And you want to see the view at the end. You know, I remember hiking this trail one time. It was so beautiful. I was like, the view at the end was so beautiful. And I remember, you know, before I started it, you know, I heard of how beautiful this view is. But let me tell you, the road there was probably the most difficult roads I've hiked. And it made me think, right? At the end of this hike, there was just this beautiful stream. Like it really just looks like, you know, something out of, you know, what you picture, like, I don't know, I can't explain it, but it just looks so beautiful. And you're just like, oh my God, it was so worth it. It was so worth, you know, the hills. It was so worth the narrow roads going through branches, you know, and just, it was so worth it. But that's the thing. a truth that I learned is that oftentimes the most difficult roads in hiking lead to the best views. And the ones that are easy usually don't lead to that great of a view. And that's just the nature. If Allah is giving you a hard road and a hard journey, know that He's creating for you a higher outcome. He's molding you to be greater. So it's important to remember this as we journey, whatever it is. Like I said in the beginning, we're trying to heal, if we're trying to grow, if we're trying to get through a difficult time in our lives, we're going through, feel like our heart is so heavy from the pain in our lives, when we feel like we can't imagine that there's going to come a time when we don't feel that pain. That's something, a common question that people say, will there ever be a time where I don't feel like this? And it's very hard to imagine that. So when the tunnel's dark, you remember that Allah is your light. And that's the truth. He's always your light. But when things are always easy, you don't see it. And so I just wanted to share these with you just as a reminder, because I think that when we have this misconception about the nature of the path, it can really lead people to self-sabotage when things go wrong. Like, I relate this also to fitness journeys, right? And people trying to get healthy. It happens all the time. They'll start getting healthy, doing well, right? And then maybe they missed a workout, or they, had a bad or had a day where they didn't eat as healthy as they wanted to. A lot of times people are like, well, I might as well throw out the rest of the day, right? It's like that feeling of I need to be perfect, all or nothing mentality, which is a huge obstacle to any path. This all or nothing mentality is what actually prevents people from change. It's either I'm all perfect, and if I just show any sign of messing up, and sometimes then what happens? You stop going for a while, and then you wake up again. You're like, wait, no, I need to get back, And so this is the same with a lot of habits or a lot of things that we try to improve in our life. And so to know, setbacks are not meant to be permanent destinations. And when we make a mistake, or when we don't do what we think is the ideal, it's just an opportunity to redirect and learn from it. Okay, well, what led me to fall back today? And asking questions is so powerful. Instead of making judgments with yourself, build that muscle of asking questions. When things happen, instead of saying, oh my God, look at you, what are you doing? But that constant self-judgment, turn it into questions. What led me to this? Okay, be a curious explorer with yourself, and just be what led me to this? What led me to fall off today? What led me to, not show up for myself, or not, do the things that you want to do? Yeah, I'll stop here and take any questions you guys have.
We hope you enjoyed our podcast. If you're inspired by the work that we're doing at the IC and want to help keep it going, subscribe to our podcasts, follow us on social media, donate to help support us at icnyu.org, and most importantly, keep us in your continued du'as. Until next time, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.